Hello, everyone. Here I am with Tracey Browning, who's joining us all the way from Australia today. Tracey, wonderful to have you here. Do please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Alex. Yes, Tracey from Australia. I've been quilting for a very long time. Since the early 1990s was when I first got inspired to try and understand this whole new world of quilting. And it was actually before I was married as well. So I've been quilting for a very long time. And then I fell into so many other things which we can work through, I'm assuming, with this interview.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No stone left unturned. Was it a family member that introduced you or just seeing a quilt?
No, I actually, I was chasing my husband at the time, as in he wasn't my husband at that point. And I had come, we met through an organisation. The equivalent organisation in America would be, I think, 4-H, but it's called Rural Youth here. And so this is 2 hours away from where I was living. And a girlfriend met me and I went to a quilt exhibit at a big festival, and I fell in love with the quilts. First time I've probably ever been to a quilting show. It was part of a major event, and that's where I sort of fell in love. And then my girlfriend Julie, whom I still quilt for, it's a magnificent piecer, appliquer, and she was taking a class, and she just showed me very quickly at her house, and she was just hand quilting a panel, and I thought, oh, okay. And that's where it really started. Is I got really enthused, and yeah, I was living in the city at the time, working full time in a banking as a lending officer, and we have what we call TAFE, which is equivalent to universities. But it's more for technical or further education. That's what it stands for.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of lifestyle type courses. And one of them was patchwork rather than quilting. And that's where I did 6 months there at this TAFE once a week. And I learned everything from scratch, from drafting my own designs, making templates. I didn't even own a rotary cutter or a ruler, and I made my first queen size sampler quilt all by hand. So I learnt English piecing, American piecing, hand piecing, all hand quilting. I borrowed my teacher's ruler and rotary cutter just to cut the sashings and to trim the blocks to be the right size. But otherwise, or every type of applique as well was a true sampler. It really was. And that was a labor of love, because sort of I did that in that 6 months, and I said it's queen size. And then I hand quilted it as well. In another 3 months, I was absolutely enamored of it all. Went and bought books with really old Gwen Marston quilting books with all your traditional quilting designs. My husband to be at the time made me a light box, and I traced all the designs on. Still can't get the pencil out.
I've always boggled it when people say to trace things with pencil, because I can't get it out either. I don't know how other people do it, but anyway, and there's a couple of things I want to follow up from there. But obviously we've got this beautiful quilt in the background, so that was your first quilt. This, I'm guessing, is one of your more recent quilts.
Yes, this was actually made for a 14-week class on my Machine Quilting Academy. So this one, it's reasonably clear. It's called Impressive Grid Work. So the class itself goes for 14 weeks, but there's over 65 designs that we go through on how to draw them and how to stitch them. So the class will be presented again in the very near future. And well, actually, I'm rejigging it so that it can be at your own pace, whereas before it was a live every single week, and those lives were going for over an hour, where we'd do 4 to 5 designs and we'd all draw together. And lots and lots of tips and hints on the way, and the order of stitching and the threads, and when you would use any of the designs. And then, of course, we came up with so many extras as well. during the course of the entire. I've run this one twice now. Impressive grid work. Also, I've done this one, a shortened version at a live event at the Australian Machine Quilting Festival, which was the actual original first inspiration for a whole heap of classes for that one. But that's yet another topic that we can go to for the Machine Quilting Festival.
And I can see some of the squares quite clearly, and there's different machine quilting designs in each square.
Yep, there's a different design in each square. Some of them actually have 4 designs in each square. So it's yes, where we can see one that's got multiples. It's easy to pull closer.
Probably not one on the camera.
No, it's there's a no, that one's not
that one, unfortunately. Not to
yeah, that's right. It's there's a whole variety. Some are just variations in size to show you. Some have got the clam, there's 8 rows of clamshells, and there's a different design in each row and that sort of thing, just to the square and what they could use some basic grids with. So they're all different types of grids, from squares to triangles to diamonds to clamshells, etc. And then how to work over that grid, through the grid, or inside.
And you mentioned a couple of things. Honestly, there's so many things I want to ask more about. But let's start with the Machine Quilting Academy.
Okay,
is this something that you've started yourself?
Yes, we might go back one step further. Back in 2009, here in Australia, sorry, even further than that, back in the early 2000s, we used to have, we had an event, the Australian Machine Quilting Conference, I think they called it, run by somebody else, which is fantastic for long arm quilters to get some education, to be able to view and purchase all sorts of tools and notions specifically for long arm machine quilting. And there are similar shows, of course. There used to be similar shows in the US. And in 2005, I got invited to teach at MQX in New Hampshire for the very first time. That was my very first trip to America teaching. And that invitation came because I was starting to build a little bit of traction unknowingly with rulers that I started producing here in Australia under my retail name, which is Constantine Quilts. So it all sort of fell in my lap. And then the invitation came to visit America to teach some classes. And that's actually where the very first time that I taught how to quilt swag borders, which is what this event's all about. I'm going to focus back on the original. So we had this quilting show in Australia, which was probably modelled on definitely the American versions, MQS, MQX, HMQS, all those acronyms. But that stopped back in about I think 2005 might have been the last one. And it was no longer being run. So it was a real gap in the industry here. There was just no education here in Australia for long arm quilters. So in 2009, a customer of mine approached me and said, come on, I'm sure we can do this together. So we started this Australian Machine Quilting Festival, where the focus was not just long arm quilting. It definitely was the main thing. But I wanted to expand it to machine quilting. So for all sizes of machines, all brands, all sizes. I'm also the Australian dealer for A1 quilting machines and the IntelliQuilter computer system. So I had to put that aside to actually create an event that was for the industry. And that was my passion, is to really nurture the industry of machine quilting here in Australia. So we started that in 2010 was our very first event. We pulled it together 9 months virtually. And I ran that. My partner retired in 2015 after the first 3, and the last 2 I ran totally by myself with my family. So it was a one one-man job, and it was very overwhelming in the end. So we ended up moving to a massive venue right in the heart of the city, of our capital city, at the Adelaide Convention Centre, where I was running up to, I think I had 92 classes, about 30 odd teachers,
Oh, that's
over 4 to 5 days.
mm.
I was blessed to have Ricky Timms out twice
Oh,
as part of the event. And we had Jenny Joan out once as well in 2014. So we brought some big names, as well as some exceptional Australian teachers as well, again on all size long arm machines or domestic machines. So that was probably a real passion project, and due to basically health at the time, and being on my own and my family growing up, so I couldn't force them to work for me for the week any longer. I ended up deciding, okay, enough was enough, and I actually sold it in 2019.
oh,
And I'm not sure
right.
if you pick the significance of the dates is that just before COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but I always had the dream of the Machine Quilting Academy, and I had hoped to be able to launch the academy pretty much at the end of my last festival, saying, okay, I can no longer do the physical, but I would love to be able to continue to provide the education virtually. So my very first webinar was actually January 2020, and COVID hit Australia in March.
Yeah.
2020.
Yeah.
So that was very start. And I started with, I called it IQ Summit, was an arm, a branch of it, which was focusing on IntelliQuilter computer system education. That was always a passion, and it was always, it was needed. It's virtually. So basically that has grown and grown and grown, with nearly 800 people registered that come to my monthly classes and chat and help each other out and share. And yeah, it's turned into a very regular thing since then. And then it's grown even further to encompass any brand of machine and skills and troubleshooting, and more of a mentoring group, which is just a different level, a higher level, that includes the computer training as well as the business of machine quilting. That's, two different memberships.
And is this an international thing, or is it just Australian?
Absolutely. No. There would be more American, Canadian members than what there are Australian, not by a lot, but there definitely is. Plus UK, I think Thailand. Definitely international, worldwide.
Wow. And do you think, is long arm quilting more popular in Australia than you think it is in other countries?
I don't think it's more popular. No, I think it's all relative. It's a very different market in that, what do they say? You've got 30 million quilters. We haven't even got 30 million people in Australia. So it's very relative. Percentage wise, I guess we could potentially be similar. I think I've definitely slowed down in selling long arm quilting machines, and there is a very strong market for secondhand though in the last few years. So the other brands, and there are 3, 4 brands that are really have smart marketing actually, and they're actually targeting the middle market, the hobby quilter. So instead of the home quilter buying their $14,000 top of the line domestic machine, they're buying a 14 machine to be able to do their long arm quilting.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And how did you get started in long arm quilting? Because I think I must have been quilting for probably about 15 years before I even saw a long arm or heard about what one was.
I guess I started all by hand. Then my very first machine pieced quilt, actually I had to do that my own. I was booked into a workshop, very pregnant with my first child. I was planning to do this local workshop and learn all about it. I had everything pre-cut beforehand. And my daughter decided to come a month early, so I missed out on the workshop, the morning of the workshop.
Oh my goodness.
So I was most put out. So, but about a month later, I ended up going back to that teacher, who is still a good friend, and I actually quilt her quilts now, and I got my instructions so I could finish it off by myself, and I freehand quilted that on my domestic machine, and it is god awful, but it was, I needed to get it done. I had a very, very young baby at the time. So then I started, obviously, I did so many different workshops with my local quilt guild, and they were magnificent. I could go along. And the funny story there is one friend, she was only probably 10 or 15 years older than me, because I was young. These are all older ladies, and they were very experienced. But Gail did teach me how you can sew on your domestic machine using I have my right foot on the foot pedal and my left foot on the pram rocking, as you could sew, peace.
Oh,
and Gail was magnificent. She'd done it with all 3 of her kids, and she said, you can still do it. It's better when they're little and they're still in the pram.
wow. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, that's extraordinary. And
yeah, so I really probably totally embraced machine work. I love the machine piecing, not so much by hand, and machine quilting. So from there, of course, I developed machine quilting skills. Again, always taking classes from very well-known teachers. One of my most favourite would have been Lee Cleland. I did an advanced domestic machine quilting class with her for over 2 days. As she's traveling around. That was a magnificent concept. She was single. She had a tiniest little cutest caravan that she dragged behind her little car all the way around Australia, visiting guilds and groups, teaching. That was her life at the time, very nomadic life. And I'm not sure if you've heard of Lee Cleland. She was probably one of the really early authors for American Quilter Society.
oh, lovely. Okay,
Quilting Makes the Quilt. The book's out of print now, but it's a magnificent book if anyone can ever get their hands on it.
Well, I haven't heard of her, but I'm going to be looking her up as soon as we finish talking.
Yes, so Lee Cleland, LEE, was her name, and she was very inspirational. I think she had a couple of books out actually, but that was the main one, Quilting Makes the Quilt. So from there, of course, I had quilted an awful lot of quilts on my domestic machine. It is hard work doing the bigger ones, and certainly a lot of effort. And of course, I started hearing about and seeing it, the internet, of course, long arm machines, both the short arm and the long arms. There was only one here in South Australia when I was seriously looking, and I did go and have a look at that. And then a few days later, I bought a second-hand machine, unseen. I didn't inspect it, from a lady in Melbourne. And I did we go over there? No, we didn't go over there. And it arrived here. And yeah, no stitch regulator on that one. That was an APQS Ultimate 1. Then my hubby did a few little modifications so I could have switches that were a bit more accessible and things like that. But unfortunately, I got that on a Friday, and on a Monday night, I had a pretty bad car accident and hurt myself so that I wrote the car off, couldn't quilt without being in pain. So for about 6 weeks, I kept on trying to move that machine around, and I actually lost all my confidence, and I was ready to sell it.
Oh, no. I'm so glad.
Yeah, but it was actually my eldest had just started what we call preschool or kindergarten here. She was 4, 3.5, 4, and her teacher at kindy, in the end, threw this quilt top at me and said, "For goodness sake, Tracey, just stipple it." So I took it home and I stippled it, and I finally got over the fear of this machine. And I was definitely more comfortable at the front of the machine than at the back. So I did practice a heck of a lot from the back of that machine, following pantographs and block designs using that laser light. I could honestly say I can't do it anymore. It really is practice. If you want to keep your skills, you've got to keep doing it. But with a computer system, I rarely go around the back of the machine anymore. But I still love all my freehand work at the front of the machine. And that's, I guess, what I'm known for now. So, yeah, that was the getting started. Yeah, so many quilts on the domestic, and that's where I started with the long arm. I'm on to my 4th or 5th long arm now, but that's another journey on how I grew into the different machines, and finally found where I like to be with the brand that I've got.
And when did quilting become a full-time occupation? Because you mentioned you were working in a bank back when you first started.
Yeah, probably, yeah, after the first, I only went back to work after the first child for a short period of time, temping. And in all honesty, you'd leave at 8 in the morning, get home after 6 at night, pay for childcare, and I'd come home with $20 in my pocket. So and a upset husband because we've got a screaming child, and no housework's done, and no meal on the table as such. We're farmers, by the way, so we crop about 3,500 acres of land. So it's a busy place. He's busy as well. We've just finished harvesting all our crops, and I've got to be around as the gopher, running around moving machinery and etc. at this time of the year. So thankfully we're done before all the storm hit last night. I do feel there's still standing crops out there, but I don't know how much they're standing today after last night's wind and hail and rain, which will be very disappointing for some of the local farmers for sure. So I guess, now I've forgotten what the actual question was.
We were
full time, yeah.
Yeah.
That's all the steps. So before I actually went full time, I had the quilting machine was for me. That was so I could quilt my quilts. I didn't intend making it a business. In fact, nearly all of my business I fell into. The only one that was a conscious, considered decision was taking on the IntelliQuilter dealership. So the rest just sort of happened. But before I really started quilting for customers, I was actually designing quilts and publishing. I've got probably 75 to 85 patterns published in magazines around the world. So my first love was the math. I love maths. And so the actual designing of piece quilts, making them, quilting them myself, and writing all the instructions. So that was probably the first part of the business. And of course, you got paid for that, but you also got exposure. The payment was negligible, didn't even cover the cost of materials, as you would well know. But the marketing value was exceptional. From there, I started just teaching some locals here, all with young kids. So they come here. We did a sampler course. I think there was about 8 of them, and there was a couple of kids here. We had my 2-year-old son and another 2-year-old lad. Totally wrecked the house the first time until we learned how to manage them. And it was, hilarious. And Nick and Luke are still actually great mates, which is amazing because they're not, they're sort of local, but they're not in our local group with the town. They're in a different town entirely. But yeah, moving forward, so yeah, I started the teaching. I started getting a few supplies in just to suit these people. Remembering that I'm half an hour from any town here, so they all came here because there was no childcare. There's a long way to take your kid to childcare than to go to a sewing class. So that's why they came here. So the teaching, the designing, the magazines. The people here in Australia probably grew through my quilting journey, and as I had each child and the farm, it was a very personal thing. I think I had 3 to 4 magazine shoots with professional photographers to come out to do all the photography. So it's like a 4 or 5 page article with everything over a period of 12 years. So people actually got to know me and personally.
Hmm.
And it's terrifying because people say, Tracey, you're the quilting lady. Oh, I don't remember you. How are the kids? And I'm thinking, who the heck are you?
Right, right. Yes, can be quite
Yeah,
disconcerting. And
yeah,
I know I'm especially terrible with names at the best of time. And so I'm always worried that I've forgotten someone.
that's
Um,
right. So from there, yeah, the long arming, the rulers, because we couldn't get them in Australia. Back when I got my second long arm, it was 2002, I moved up to the stitch regulated long arm, the APQS Millennium. The dollar, the exchange rate is what kills us here in Australia. And it's not great again at the minute, which is also why things have slowed down sales wise. Back then it was 51 cents. So a $15,500 quilting machine in US dollars ended up over $33,000 for me.
wow. Okay. Yeah.
That was in 2002. At the moment, the exchange rates, the price of the long arm machines have gone up exponentially since then.
Mm.
But it's the exchange rate that kills us. So at the
Yeah.
moment, with the rates at around 64, 65, we're talking about the same price as what I paid in 2002 for a long arm machine.
There's something strange about economics, I think.
I know.
And you were talking about designing your own rulers and manufacturing your own rulers, and that came about out of necessity, I think. Do you?
Absolutely. That's a typical farmer mentality. I wasn't going to pay Australian $400 for 8 circle rulers from the US.
Yeah.
Basically. So I just came home. I looked up the yellow pages. I'm not sure if you have the yellow pages over there.
We used to have it in the UK. I don't know whether they had, I'm sure they had something equivalent in America as well.
Possibly. Certainly
Mm.
don't have it here anymore, not with Google. But back then it was the yellow pages, and I found a laser cutting service. And I just put a message out to Aussie quilters. We had an Aussie online quilting group, not long arm, but just a quilting group, to say, okay, this is just at cost price, basically, because there's a cost involved in the programming of cutting these rulers for each different shape. And I said, all right. So they were no frills. They had no lines etched on them, nothing. But we had a series of circles and ovals and hearts and rectangles and the real basic stuff. And I had enough to make an initial order with other long armers around the country, putting their faith in me that, okay, they're going to get some no frills, basic acrylic templates that they can utilize. And that's where it all started, the no frills Constantine quilt rulers. And again, another one as that started in 2002. By 2005, I had a much bigger range, and I didn't actually put it. Somebody from Australia put it on some American list, and then I started getting inquiries, and then I got invited to teach at MQX. Plus, got a distributor in the States because, of course, I couldn't sell them over there. So they were also at MQX, which obviously marries in together. I'm teaching classes, they're selling my rulers, and that's how it also, again, I fell into it.
Yeah, well, it just sounds amazing. And you were talking about the kind of farmer mentality, and I know that you've co-authored a book, right? About this kind of rural entrepreneurship and that.
Yep, that's right. It's I've even got one here. Look
Oh,
at this.
look, there we go.
Yay.
Tell me about that project.
There are 15 authors, and there is a copywriter, a girl in Victoria who is regional, young children as well. And so she's experienced in the publishing world. And she put it out there. She'd already done a collaborative book on a different topic, I think the previous year. So then she decided to go and use this angle of women in regional areas that are entrepreneurs running their business, and how to make it work with all the obstacles that you have to overcome. My biggest obstacle in all these years, and especially running the Machine Quilting Festival, was the tech. Well, more, it's the internet. I couldn't get it. I'd be up at 1, 2 in the morning, and it'd take like 3 minutes for a keystroke to actually record in some of the things. So the internet was excruciatingly slow and unresponsive at times. But there are so many other obstacles you have to overcome when you live in rural and regional areas. So the book focuses on all different types of businesses, from bookkeepers to doctors to, well, crafters, to you name it. They copywriters, and the obstacles they have to overcome and how they overcome them. We all had a slightly different bent, so she's sort of categorized us in different topics so that we could promote. Some of it is mindfulness, some of it is systemization, but underlying all of it is how you can get around those obstacles in regional and rural areas. So, and it was all women.
Fascinating. And I'm sure a lot of people in rural America and rural parts of other countries probably are encountering.
It'd be no different. It'd be no different. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's brilliant. And I know the book's on your website, and I'll include a link to it in your interview notes. So tell us about your workshop. What are we going to be learning?
Okay, I've sort of gone back to basics again. It is quilted swags on borders, and look, I've been doing it for so long, and that's why I created, I think it was the very first swag template ever. And it was actually an American that sort of just, it was a flyaway comment. Oh, I wish we could do these swags really quickly and easily. So I did come up with the ruler. I did send it to her in America and said, here, you test it for me as well. And then I developed lots of ideas, developed my own book, very simple, self-published printed book, just to give the step-by-steps. As well on how to make it work. Virtually no maths. It's and it's very easy then to adjust for different size borders and piecing, etc., to make it fit. So it's quite, I've been teaching it for so long, and I thought, well, let's go back to this one. There are more swag rulers out there now, slightly different ways of doing it. I'm demonstrating using my swag rulers, but there's also one little short area where you can create your own, using your own templates or tools that you may already have. So you don't absolutely have to have the ruler that I am demonstrating with. You can do it with circles and ovals as well. So without buying a specialized ruler. Again, that's the farmer mentality. Work with what you've got and think outside the square on the tools that you may already own. So I don't know, can I share my screen on this and I can just show you an example of why?
Yeah, I think I need to
enable it.
Does that work?
Let's see if it'll work this time. Yay.
Okay, lovely. Ooh.
Let's see if it will let me do it. Okay, so this quilt is actually one I've recently done. So you can, the whole point, I know the way that it's colored, you're not really, I don't really want you to take much notice of the center, but the borders is your swag. To me, it's a frame. And the reason why I love this tile, and you can, there's so many different types of swag. Don't forget, it doesn't just have to be 3 simple arcs. You can really dress them up at times, but this is what it's all based on. And to me, how many people will make a quilt and they put this beautiful floral border on it, but no quilting will show up. Straight lines will show up. Anything a bit geometrical. To me, a swag is a frame, whether it's a curved frame, whether it's a pointy frame, a pointy swag. A swag is just something that's going to travel. And it's a frame on the main part of the quilt. And it goes really well over busy borders, and it shows up on a busy border as well. So that's a plus. It's really, really quick to execute, especially with the way I teach you to adjust your width of your swag to fit what is in front of you, because no quilt is perfectly square or will be divisible equally on opposite sides.
This is a beautiful quilt. Did you make this one yourself?
No, it's a customer quilt that I've just done recently. That's all.
It's lovely, and you've got that beautiful feather border, inner border as well.
Yep,
Just
yep. That's a bit more of the formal stuff to highlight that. But the rest of that quilt is stitcheries, and then very ad hoc piecing to pull it all together, because the stitcheries are all different sizes. That was actually just a freehand meander with daisies in and around all of that, and then ditching all the stitcheries. So that's just to make it a little bit more special, is to put the swag and the feather, which doesn't, so none of that took very long at all. That was actually it's a fairly quick quilting job.
It's amazing to hear you say that, because I can believe you, because when someone spends, you know, years practicing something, it doesn't take them, they make it look easy. But I know that if I tried to do this, well, for a start, it wouldn't be lying flat.
Yeah, I probably didn't take this as a great photo on the floor in front of a set of windows to get the light going across it to get the quilting to show.
Yeah.
So absolutely. That's yeah, there's a few creases because it was folded up, and I just threw it out there to try and get the quilting to show in a photo on that particular one.
No, very effective. Oh,
yeah,
thank you for showing that. And I'm massively looking forward to the workshop, because this, I did a sort of free motion quilting class many years ago and have never finessed beyond that. So I'm very much looking forward to doing this and using the technique. I know we're running out of time a little bit. I wanted to ask you, what are some of your, or who are some of your inspirations when it comes to making or just any kind of creativity?
Probably say my biggest inspiration is probably my sister. We've done a lot of quilts together. We've won a lot of awards together as well. And so my sister's Helen Stubbings from Hugs and Kisses of Australia, who's also been teaching and heading to Quilt Market and to shows in America she started coming with me the year after I went. And but she's taken her business slightly different direction. She's not a machine quilter, she's more of a designer. And yeah, and she challenges me every single time on, you know, what potentially I'm going to be able to create. So yeah, I would probably say that one.
To have someone that you're close to that's also in the same industry as well, and I can imagine that there's probably a little bit of one-upping on each other as well, a little bit of friendly competition maybe sometimes.
No, not so much. We I guess we've worked together. We've had businesses together as well, so that's something to consider. She's also published, has written her own books with the American Quilter Society, as well as self-published many. I'll just show you, this is one quilt that I did for her, and it is in one of her books somewhere over there, which is another one of hers. Did I actually say? No, I probably haven't. Oh yeah, this is just one of her block of the months. She's more into English paper piecing, all handwork. She's into slow stitching and her embroideries and her applique and her applique paper. So she was one of the first ones to utilize the iron-on applique paper for English paper piecing, and for applique, the leave-in ones, the ones that dissolve after they're washed. And yeah, and I've quilted an awful lot of her quilts. This one was that was displayed at Quilt Market on Red Rooster stand, and that was just simply one of her fabric ranges, and that was a quilt sampler she made out of all of the purples in that range. Then she throws them to me, and then I've got to quilt them, come up with something special to quilt them with.
That is just, the design is amazing, but then the quilting is extraordinary. Do you consult with her on the design, or did you?
No, she just throws it to me and says do what you want. So a lot of that was a lot of it's mostly freehand, or yeah, the quilting is freehand. Definitely. But the framework was actually created. I have a set of French curve rulers, not quilting rulers. These are just sewing French curve rulers, and I just threw them on the quilt with chalk pens and started building shapes, and then you fill it in with feathers. They're all freehand, none of them are the same. And you built, it's like a mandala, but I built it using the French curves.
Just extraordinary. I'm sure I'm not going to be the only one looking at this and thinking, not in a million years could I do this. But I suppose it's like you got to start somewhere, and you start with a class like this one that you're going to be doing. And
probably one of my greatest. I'm proud of this one. This was a quilt that actually won the Brother Wall Workmanship Award, one of the top 10 awards at Paducah in 2007. And I believe at the time they told me it was the first coloured quilt in a show. So we all know that colouring is quite popular now. But this is one that I designed and machine quilted, all without a stitch regulator at the time. And it was a whole cloth. And then I sent it to Helen because she had created, I think it was the year before, we got a third prize at MQS for a coloured quilt of hers. And this is all done using pencils.
And so she was colouring it in after you had done the quilting?
After I'd quilted it.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So this is called Lace. And the design came from, I picked up a book for $5 at a market, and it was called The History of Lace. So there was a tiny little black and white photo in there, and it was a piece of lace designed by Anton Unger in 1898 in Europe. And I basically thought, oh, I can see that as a quilting design. So this was all drawn on a piece of paper, full size virtually. Well, it's actually, if you really look at it, I'm sure you can see your mouse, it's an 1/8. So if you go from the center to the corner, and
yes,
yep, and it's mirrored and then rotated to get the design. So I gridded it all up, and obviously I photocopied what was in the book, blew it up a little bit, gridded it up, and then I hand drew it after that, with obviously a fair bit of artistic license to make it a quilting design with closed shapes that could be coloured.
That's just extraordinary. And the colours that your sister chose are, I mean, just beautiful.
Yep. So her youngest would have been 1 or 2 at the time. It was hilarious because everyone says, well, how do you make that colour fast? And I said, well, thank God she could, because Tilly at the time decided she was going to help her mum colour this quilt. We had a fair bit of pencil where that didn't need to be. So this has been washed a number of times to get the pencil out that we didn't want to be there, but prove that it would stay there. There was, I don't think it's showing in that photo, but there is one petal. It's still hanging up on the wall in my studio here. There's one petal somewhere up here as an orange one that's really, really faded. There was one that she missed on sealing, and you can see how it's faded now and half washed out. I haven't gone back to recolor it and touch it up, because it's a really good teaching tool, or you can show people, can you find the faded petal? And that's what happens after all these years when it didn't get sealed, but the rest of it still looks the same. So that's great.
Oh my
goodness. It's started out at 62 inches square, and by the time it was quilted and washed so many times, it ended up about 58 inches square.
Gosh,
and it's faux trapunto, so it's double batted wool over cotton.
I think if you told anyone other than a quilter that you'd washed it multiple times, they'd probably be like, okay, yeah, fine. But just to know how, like, all the stitching and the coloring and just to know that it's had to then go in the washing machine as well, it's like taking your heart in your mouth and risking so much every time you had to put it in the machine. That's extraordinary.
Well, it was only actually done on cheap muslin and fabric as let's practice, I'll do a better one next time. I thought, yeah, you'll never do it twice. So that's a lesson to learn. Always use the fabrics that you really want to use, and if it doesn't work out, go buy some more. Don't worry, don't do a practice piece.
Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. Well, thank you so much for sharing that, and I'll make sure to link to your sister's work in the interview notes as well.
Yes.
We are recording this at the very end of November, and it'll be going live at the beginning of January. Last question, what have you got in mind for 2024?
Hopefully I will have some newer classes to release on quilting at Machine Quilting Academy that are more freehand rather than the computer classes. Based on this one, the behind me will be released yet again. Another one will be this one. This is only a portion of it, which is Advanced Border Magic, and there is a lot more borders than what's in this photo. That's only about a quarter of the quilt. Teaching people how to draw and do the maths to make it fit any border that they have in front of them, as well as stitch. There's also another one which is more simple borders too. So I have classes that are all the groundwork is being done. I just have to fine tune videos, etc., to be able to release, so that we have some more inspiration for those that don't own an IntelliQuilter, because so far the focus has been more IntelliQuilter than anything else. So that's probably the big aim is I've got to get these classes. Like I said, I've actually taught them once face to face, but they were short 2-hour classes.
Yeah.
I think one was a 3-hour. That was a feather class. But there's so many that I need to convert to be online that I really need to focus on getting some of these out there, and then learning how to do the marketing. I can do all this side of it, but the marketing is what I'm not so great at.
Marketing is a constant learning curve for all of us, I think. Just reassure me though on one thing. I mean, these are advanced, I would assume, but the swag class that you're going to be teaching, that one is going to be for people like
total beginner basic. That's totally not as advanced as there's that sort of work. No, once you know the absolute basics, then you can start building and adding all the fancy stuff to it.
Wonderful. Well, look, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. Thank you so much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to watching that class.
Thank you. I hope people learn something and they can apply it to their own quilts. That's the whole point of it, whether they use my rulers or any others that they own, or create those shapes using circles and ovals.
Lovely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.